Hey guys, and welcome to another installment in my Just a Tip series. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you guys how to make an easy feathered treble hook using no fly tying tools or scales. If you do find it helpful, I'd appreciate it if you gave it a thumbs up. And now let's go ahead and get right into it. And first, let's talk about materials. The first thing you're going to need are some feathers, and these are saddle hackle feathers. They're commonly used, they're easy to find, and these are actually rooster feathers. They're dyed saddle hackle rooster feathers, and I picked these up from Hobby Lobby. Now, if you do live near a fly tying shop, it would be a better option to pick up your feathers from there. They'll just be higher quality, but these work just fine. They do come a little bit crumpled sometimes, but you can actually repair those feathers with some steam. If you hold the feathers into some steam and kind of prune them out, they'll actually go back to their original shape. Just something to keep in mind. And also, your feathers don't have to be saddle hackle, but just in general, you want to go with something that is relatively slim and something that tapers to a point at the end. That's just going to give it a better look. The next thing you're going to need is some flash, and I bought this multicolor pack off of Amazon. And basically it's just a sparkly tinsel type material, and it'll add some flash to that feathered treble hook. The next thing we're going to need is some heat shrink tubing, and if you don't already have some of this stuff, you should get some because it's very useful for a lot of different things. So I actually have these kits by Wirefy that you can pick up off of Amazon, and they come in a bunch of different sizes, all the way from 3/32 of an inch all the way to 3/4 of an inch. But it's that 3/32 of an inch, that smallest one that I'm holding right here, is what I'm going to be using. It's really the ideal diameter for most of these treble hooks. And the last thing that we need is a heat gun, and this one was only like $12 or something on Amazon. And once again, this is a tool that's useful for a lot of different things, not just for this. So I highly recommend you guys pick up a heat gun for yourself. These things are super useful. Now, the rest of the materials you should already have. You need a treble hook, obviously, and some split ring pliers, but these are optional. I mean, if you can use your fingernails to get the split rings off, good for you, but I prefer to use the split ring pliers. And then, of course, some scissors. It doesn't have to be fly tying scissors or any kind of special scissors, just some normal scissors you got laying around your house. So today I'm going to be making a feathered treble hook for this orange and yellow spoon. And I've got some feathers and some flash picked out here as well. Now, if I was going to be making a feathered treble hook for a very natural looking bait, I'd probably go with some white flash or some white feathers, something that looked a little bit more natural, but this is going to be a bright, flashy feathered treble hook we're making today. So I've got some orange feathers picked out, and I definitely recommend that you go with 3 feathers in total. Now with the flash, I typically will use somewhere between 3 and 6 strands in total. We're trying to make this treble hook as vibrant as possible to go along with this bright yellow and orange vivid colored lure. So today I'm going to be using 6 total strands. I'm probably going to use 3 of the yellow and then 1 of each of these other colors just to add some additional color and contrast to it. Now the first thing we want to do here is go ahead and remove our treble hook. Now, as you guys can see, this heat shrink wrap is actually not as wide as the eye of that treble hook, but it does expand, and it is just big enough to slide over it. That's the perfect size that we want. So next we're just going to cut off a 1/4 inch piece of that heat shrink tubing. Just like that. You guys will see here the piece we're using is not very big at all. Now we're going to go ahead and prepare our flash, so I'm just going to go ahead and take out my first color here. And I'm going to take 1 single strand of that flash through the eye of the treble hook. And I want that single strand to extend about 3/4 of an inch past the bends of that treble hook. And once I have that length established, I'm going to fold this strand over, pinching at the eye. And now I'm going to pinch it right here where it meets that length on the other side. And now I can simply just pull it out. Now I'm going to cut it right at that spot. And now this piece that we've cut can be used to measure the remaining strands. We're going to cut them all approximately the same length. So now I'm just going to use this as a guide and cut the rest of my strands. Alright, now we have our flash all cut and prepared, and now it's time to go ahead and prepare our feathers. Alright, so with the feathers and the flash, you can play around with different lengths, but in this case I'm going to make these feathers also extend 3/4 of an inch past the bends of the hook. But if you want to, you can make the flash longer, you can make the feathers longer, it really doesn't matter. You guys can experiment with that on your own, but I'm going to do them the same size. So what I'm going to do with each of these feathers is line it up with the shaft of that hook until that feather is extending about 3/4 of an inch past the bends of the hook, just like that. And then where the feather crosses the eye, I'm actually going to start pulling back like this just to mark that spot. So now you can clearly see where that separation is happening. What I'm going to do is actually pluck the barbules from the shaft of the feather all the way down, starting at that separation down to the base. You only want to do a little bit at a time here. You don't want to try to pluck them all off at once because you could end up damaging the shaft of that feather, and that's not what we want. But we're just going to start pulling all of this material off of the shaft of that feather. And once we've plucked all that off, our feather is now prepared, and this is what it looks like. And now I'm going to repeat the same measuring and stripping process with the other 2 feathers. Alright guys, now I have my 3 feathers all stripped down and prepared. And I've also gone ahead and trimmed down the shaft of this feather so that when I line it up with the eye of that treble hook, it extends about 1 inch to 1.5 inches behind the eye. Alright, so now we have all our materials gathered up, and my next step is going to be to take our strands of flash, and we're just going to pass those through the eye of that treble hook. And we're going to pull them through halfway, keeping it as even as we can. Doesn't have to be exactly perfect. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold those down, applying tension to pull them tight, and I'm just going to pinch to hold them in place. And now it's time to add the feathers, and you'll notice that each feather has a natural curve. So what I'm going to do here is insert the shaft of the feather through the eye of the treble hook like that, right up to the base. And I want this feather to be curving away from the shaft of that treble hook. And what I'll do now that the feather is in place is actually pinch it together with our flash, and I'm going to bend that shaft over in the eye of the treble hook like that, and I'm going to pinch that down as well. And if things don't look perfect during this part of the process, don't worry, because at the end we'll be able to maneuver that flash and those feathers around to make it look a little bit better. And now I'm just going to repeat the same process with my other 2 feathers, placing them in the unoccupied gaps on the treble hook. Alright guys, I now have my 3 feathers and all my flash in place, and once we're at this stage, it's time to take that piece of heat shrink wrap that we created at the very beginning, and what we're going to do now is slide that over the eye of the treble hook, just like that. Now at this stage you can make any adjustments that you want to your feathers, or you can move your flash in between different gaps of the treble hooks just to make it more even and balanced out. I'm pretty happy with the way this one looks right now. Once you have everything nice and situated the way that you want, it's time to take our heat gun, and we're just going to tighten that heat shrink wrap all the way down. Alrighty, now that we have our heat shrink wrap tightened down and our feathers and flash situated the way that we want, I'm going to look for the 3 shafts of the feathers that we folded over, like this one right here, and I'm just going to take my scissors and I'm going to cut that as close to the heat shrink wrap as possible. And for my final step here, I am just going to add 1 small drop of super glue right here at the base of the eye of that hook, just to protect those materials from the split ring. And now we have our finished product, a pretty darn decent looking feathered treble hook. And once that glue has dried, you can go ahead and pop that treble hook back onto your lure, and if I do say so myself, this one is looking pretty sexy. Now, is this as good as a traditionally tied feathered treble hook? No, it is not. For starters, you're going to have a lot more control and finesse in positioning the feathers and the flash material if you're tying it with thread versus shrinking it down with the heat shrink wrap. And secondly, the heat shrink wrap has more weight than the thread will. Now this won't make any difference at all for your steady retrieve baits like spoons or crankbaits, things like that. But if you're fishing a topwater popper, for example, it could cause that treble to fall a little bit quicker on the pauses. And it may look just a little bit more unnatural with some of those lures that you frequently pause, like the jerk baits or the topwater poppers. But if you don't have fly tying tools or skills, I think this is a pretty solid alternative. If you guys enjoyed the video or learned something today, I'd appreciate it if you leave a thumbs up. Thanks for taking time out of your day to watch my video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.